I'm Madison Mary and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my October wrap-up. So I'm really excited. I read some stellar reads in October and some kind of but in total I read 7 books. They were all physical. When it comes to genres, 3 of them were fantasy, 2 of them were suspense, 1 was a romance, and 1 was a horror. My age ranges were 1 middle grade, 2 young adult, 1 new adult, and 3 adult books. And then my favorite statistic, which is my total page count. For the month of October, that was 2,285 pages. As per normal, I'm going to be starting with my lowest rated reads and work up to my highest rated reads. Without further ado, let's get into them. So my lowest rated read for the month was a 1.5 star, and that was They All Fell Down by Rachel Howzel-Hall. The author was inspired by And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So I went into this really excited. It was actually a 5-star prediction, and as you can tell, it was clearly not. But I did think that it had a lot of potential. So we follow Miriam. She is a divorced mother who takes a lot of Valium, but Miriam ends up getting an email saying that she has been selected to be part of a reality TV show, and she goes, oh my god, yes. And so she goes, she gets on this boat and she's very excited. It's on the coast of Mexico on this island. And while she's on the boat with these 6 other strangers, she ends up being told, actually, no, that's not why you're here, and here's the reason actually why. Basically, it's about her being on this island in this house with all these strangers, and strange things begin happening, and then people start dying. And, you know, if you've read And Then There Were None, I don't think there's any point to reading this book. If you haven't read it, then maybe you would actually find this really interesting, because I'm just trying to be really nice here. In my opinion, this book is a low-rent version of And Then There Were None. So yeah. Also, Miriam is just a really unlikable character, and I'm fine with having unlikable, unreliable narrators in my thrillers, suspense, all those kind of things. But Miriam was she was really not likable, and she just got like, I'm not gonna spend more time talking about this. It just wasn't good. I don't recommend it. My next book is a 3-star read, and that is A Golden Fury by Samantha Cohoe. I was sent an ARC by the publisher, and then I was also sent a finished copy, and this is a very beautiful book. Like, it is stunning. The end pages are beautiful, and it even has some debossing on it, but it just did not live up to my expectations, which is why it's a 3 out of 5 stars. This is set during the French Revolution, and Thea and her mother do live in France during this time, and they are both alchemists. Thea's mum is actually a very renowned alchemist, and Thea has been studying underneath her. Now, the ultimate alchemist's goal is to create the Philosopher's Stone, and so Thea and her mum have been working on it for years, and they get really close to making it, and then Thea's mum completely shuts her out, ends up pretty much making it, and then goes mad and smashes the stone to pieces. She finds that there's actually a curse placed upon those who try and create the Philosopher's Stone, and if they are not worthy of it, they will end up losing their mind, which is what happened to her mother. But she ends up escaping to Oxford, you know, because of the French Revolution, and she ends up finding her father, who doesn't know she exists, and ends up being with him, and she takes that time to go through her mother's notes. So Thea is then proposed with a problem. She either has to figure out how to create the Philosopher's Stone to heal her mother from her madness, or try and prevent anyone else from making it and fall into the same fate. The problem is that a lot of people want Thea's notes. They want to know what her mother tried to do because they think that they can create it and don't believe in the curse. This book was very lagging. It was very slow. The majority of this book is set in Oxford with Thea trying to prevent other people from making the stone. And then the whole last third of this book is just like totally different. Like, it's not, I'm not gonna say because it does spoil it, but it was just kind of weird and strange, and I actually did prefer that last third, but I do think that the ending was just kind of, I didn't like the ending. I just don't like that the alchemy also wasn't as prominent as I would have liked it to have been. You do know Thea as she's trying to, you know, recreate the Philosopher's Stone, but you don't actually know about alchemy in the broader sense of this world and how it kind of works, which sucked in my opinion. I was really excited for a very strong alchemy book, a very fast-paced, a very high-stakes novel, and this is not. There are high stakes, but you don't really care that much about them. Like, the last third is just totally different, that it didn't mesh. So it's 3 out of 5 stars. Pick it up if it sounds interesting to you. You might enjoy it more than I did, but meh. My next book is a 3.5 star read, and that is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I read this as part of my 3 thrillers reading vlogs. If you've not checked that out, please click up above. So this book follows Darby Thorns. She is a college student and she's just found out that her mother is dying of pancreatic cancer. Now, the last time Darby spoke to her mother, they had a fight and they've not spoken in months. So Darby decides that she's going to immediately drive from college, which is in Colorado, to Utah to go visit her dying mother at her bedside to apologize. But the only problem is that as Darby is making this trip, there is actually a blizzard coming in. And so Darby's car is crappy and she ends up having to pull over at a very remote rest stop. She gets there, goes inside, there's 4 other people. She figures, okay, I'm gonna wait for the snowplows, find out the snowplows aren't coming until the next morning. So she goes outside to try and find cell signal to tell her sister that she's not gonna be able to make it to the hospital tonight. When she's on her way back from, looking for cell signal, she looks inside the car next to hers. She ends up seeing there's a cage in this van, and then inside this cage is a little girl. And she's like, oh my God, like someone inside is a kidnapper. And so that's kind of what this is about. I was really excited for this and I thought it was a suspense thriller novel, and in my opinion, it's more of a survival story. You end up finding out within the first 100 pages who the kidnapper is, and that to me was just very anticlimactic, and that kind of sucked. I think that if that had not been the case, I would have rated this a lot higher. There was not a lot of guessing in this book. I was never really that scared about what could happen next, and it was more so, okay, how is she going to survive? What is she going to do? I expected this to be a thriller, which is why it's not a 4 star. It's a 3.5 because it was very atmospheric. I felt like I was in this snowstorm. I thought that Darby made actually quite rational decisions, and when she made decisions that weren't that rational, she kind of talked them out and was like, I know this is stupid to do, but I don't know what else I can do. And so I was very appreciative of that. But otherwise, this just wasn't what I wanted it to be. It wasn't what everyone kind of hyped it up to be, which really sucked because this was another 5-star prediction that did not end up being a 5-star prediction. Next, we have my 4-star read, and that is Small Spaces by Katherine Arden. This is my 1 middle grade I read, and is the 2nd middle grade I read this year. So we follow Ollie. She's 11 years old. A year ago, her mother died, and so she's very much dealing with that grief. Her father is a single dad, and he's really trying his best, and you kind of see that side of their relationship, how there is a lot of tension between the 2 of them, and he's trying his best, but he doesn't really know what he can do to kind of fill this hole that their mother created. But Ollie does try and kind of feel her grief, kind of push it to the side by reading books. She loves reading. It's her form of escapism, and it's just her #1 thing to do. She's also incredibly smart. And what ends up happening at the beginning of this book is she's, on her way home from school, she's going to the creek where she normally sits and reads, and she ends up seeing this distraught woman crying and about to throw a book into a river, and she's like muttering utter nonsense. Ollie's like, oh my God, you cannot just throw a book into a river. And she ends up saving the book / stealing it and running home with it. And she starts reading it, and it's like this really creepy kind of ghost story about this person called the Smiling Man and these deals he made with these 2 brothers. And then a couple days later, her class ends up going on a field trip to this nearby farm. Ollie ends up wandering off, and she ends up finding these graves, and these graves have the names of the people that she's been reading about in this book. And she's like, oh my God, maybe this isn't fiction. And then as they're leaving, their bus ends up breaking down, and the bus driver tells her, you best get moving before they come get you. The Smiling Man from the novel she's been reading is actually real. So that's what this is about. I actually really loved it. For a middle grade horror, it was actually quite creepy. I will admit, after I finished this, I was like, I don't trust scarecrows anymore. And I've always found them to be slightly unnerving, but now I'm like, no, not happening. So I do give it props for being very creepy. It's not a full 5 stars because I did think that the ending was quite rushed. I do think that this book definitely delves more into the topic of grief and dealing with grief in different ways and how a person feels about the death of a parent. So I do think this is actually a great middle grade novel. It has a lot of amazing messages in it. And I do think that the dynamic between Ollie and her 2 new friends is really fun. And overall, I did enjoy this. And this is actually a series, so I would pick up the 2nd book. So yes. Then onto my 4.5 star read, and that was A Court of Thorns and Roses by SJMaas, my one and only favorite author, forever and ever and ever. So if you guys aren't aware, there is a read along called ACOTAR Along. It is hosted by myself and the wonderful Katie from Katie's Book Nook. We read ACOTAR in the month of October, and in November we are reading ACOMath. The live show date is actually changing because we didn't realize it was during Thanksgiving weekend and Katie's not available. So please do check out. Tomorrow I am posting on our Twitter account the different dates and times that we are considering. There are going to be 3 of them, and whichever one wins is going to be the date that we do. So it is going to actually take place during the first week of December, just because of so much going on. But ACOTAR follows Feyre Archeron. She is a human in a world where there are fairies, and the Fae are actually considered to be quite evil. There was a massive war centuries ago between the Fae and the humans, and the mortal lands have since then been very shrunk, but they do keep to themselves, and the High Fae keep to themselves as well. But one day, Feyre is hunting for her family, and she ends up killing a wolf, and this wolf ends up being a fairy in disguise, and so she is taken back to Fairylands as a captive, as penance for the death that she took. And it's about her and this Fae that she's living with, and it's their romance, and there's a lot more to it than that. But if you have not read this series, I feel like that's the best way I can describe the first book without giving anything away. This is a 4.5 star. I will admit the first time I read this, it was a 4-star read. I bumped it up by half a star because I just love Under the Mountain so much. Like, Under the Mountain to me is a full 5 stars, and then the rest of this book is 4 stars, so that's why it evened out to 4.5. I did tab it, and you know, I highlighted it in places as well, which was really fun, and I'm just so excited to continue on with the series this month when I read ACOMath. And it is my birth month, so like reading ACOMath in my birth month is like perfect. And then last but not least, we have my 2 5-star reads. The first one is going to be Mistletoe and Mr by Sarah Morgenthaler. I love Sarah Morgenthaler. Her books are just some of my favorites. This is her second book, which is also the second book in a series. The first book was The Tourist Attraction. This came out in May of this year. And then book 2 just came out in, God, what month was it? October. Oh, came out last month. Right, that's why I read it last month. Anyway, this book follows the best friend of book 1. I do think that this series should be read in order just because you meet these characters in this book, and the events that occur at the end of this book are very pertinent to what happens in this one. So I'm going to tell you guys about what this one's about. So both these books take place in the fictional town of Moose Springs, Alaska. This is a town where there is a very famous and very prominent hotel resort where the very elite go to spend their winters. And we follow, and the townspeople, the locals, the townspeople absolutely hate the tourists, and they hate tourist season. So we follow Graham Barnett, and he is the owner of a diner called the Tourist Trap. Now he named this ironically. He was like, oh, I'm gonna name it the Tourist Trap, but like, I hate tourists. And it ends up literally becoming a tourist trap, and he's not a happy camper with that. Then we follow Zoe Cladwell, and she has saved up enough money for the last couple of years to finally go on her dream trip to Alaska. And when she gets there, she ends up meeting the grumpy owner of the Tourist Trap, and it is their romance. I love this series so much. I do know that it's very hit or miss for a lot of people, but I personally think it's great. And Lana, who you meet in this book, comes off very superficial, but then in the sequel, you find out so much more about Lana, and I completely related to her and thought that she was just a phenomenal character to follow. So yes. And lastly, probably one of my favorite books of 2020 is Beyond the Ruby Veil by Mara Fitzgerald. This is my art copy, so I'm going to put this down and show you guys what the actual cover looks like. I freaking adore this book with all my heart. It ends on such a cliffhanger, and I'm just like, oh, crazy to get the sequel. But we follow this place, but this book is set in the land of Okja. Okja? But this book is set in the land of, okay, first off, I'm sorry if I butcher the name of this land. First off, I want to say I'm really sorry if I butcher any of these names. So this book is set in the land of Okja. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it. I don't know if it's like Okja or Okja or Ochia. It's one of those. It's spelled O-C-C-H-I. So I'm thinking like Okja, but I could be really wrong. But that's the town that we are set in, and this town is secluded and closed off by a ruby veil. They believe that there's nothing else for miles or like anything else at all except for their town, and their town, it's thriving. It's ruled by different houses. Wealthiest of those houses is House Morandi, but the town is actually ruled by the Water Cree, and the Water Cree is a creature that can turn blood into water. Without her, the town would end up dying of thirst because there is no other form of water apart from the water Cree turning blood into it. And so as a tradition, there is a thing called an omen, and it is like a tiny bruise that appears on your body. And if you end up getting this bruise on your body, you must immediately sacrifice yourself to the water Cree's tower in order to be used as a source of blood to create water. And that's just how the tradition of this world works. That's just how things have always been. And so we are following Emanuela, and she is currently betrothed to her best friend, who is Alessandro Morandi. And they actually are completely platonic because they're both gay. But the great thing about this marriage is the fact that Emanuela will end up gaining a lot of power as the wife of House Morandi. And she's very excited because she is such a power-hungry person. She wants power over everyone. She wants everyone to envy her. She wants to be the best of the best. She just wants to be absolute, basically. The only problem is that she has been hiding her omen for the past decade, and on her wedding day, her omen ends up being revealed, and she is then thrown to the Water Cree's tower to be killed. The thing is that she refuses this to happen, and so she ends up fighting back and killing the Water Cree, and that creates a whole new slew of problems because now their town has no source of water. And so she and Alessandro must go out and travel into the Vale to figure out if there's anything they can do to create more water, or else the town will A, die, and B, they will kill her. And that's basically what this is about. There's actually so much more to this book than just that synopsis. That synopsis is only like maybe the first 50 to 100 pages, and after that it's so amazing. And I think that what I love the most about this was the fact that Emanuela is just such a bloodthirsty, power-hungry, vicious character to follow, and I've never really read such an anti-heroine before, because she does want to save her town, but she wants to save her town because she wants to be the savior of the town, and her power is worth more than anything else in the world. And I've just never really met a character like her before. She is comparable to Alessandra in The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller, but this book is definitely a lot more gory and a lot more gruesome and just intense than that book is. There is eye horror in this, which I do want to mention because the eye horror is completely terrifying. I have read books with eye horror before, such as Ruthless Gods by Emily A. Duncan, but this is a lot worse. I genuinely was like, oh, this not good. Like, it was gross, but it was cool, but gross. And this book is very heavily entrenched in blood magic, and so do beware that there is some ritual self-harm for the sake of magic in this. And there is a lot of torture as well in this novel. And as I said, both our characters are gay, but that aspect of this book isn't very prominent. It is mentioned our main character does have a sapphic attraction to another female character, but nothing is ever really pursued. And that's kind of all it is. Like, there's never actually any romance between them. There's her thinking, oh, like, kind of want to kiss her, but like, kind of also want to stab her thing going on, which is great. Like, we love that whole dynamic of, I want to kiss you, but I also want to stab you. So what do we do? And she's just really badass. I love her. I highly, highly recommend this book. I would easily reread this book. It is one of my favorites of the year, hands down. Okay, that's it. I'm gonna stop rambling. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in the month of October. And that's it for this video. If you did enjoy it, please click the like button down below. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel. And until next time, thanks a bunch. Bye!